Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. I'm Jim Cardle. The Texas State Board of Education designs and oversees the structure and framework for what now includes more than 5 million Texas school children. State Board of Education member Tincy Miller is from District 12, based in Dallas and including Collin County. Tincy Miller has long been a champion for dyslexia students in Texas, for phonics in the classroom, and has also been involved in protecting the Permanent School Fund, sometimes known as the Children's Textbook Fund. The State Board recently met to debate English standards, math standards, and science content, and we're pleased to be able to visit today to get an update from SBOE member Tincy Miller from District 12. Well, Tincy Miller from State Board of Education, District 12, thanks for coming in today. We appreciate your time.
Sure, glad to be here.
As we always do, I want to give you the opportunity. You all at the State Board of Education have been going for a couple days. You've got another day to go. But a lot of folks will know about the State Board of Education because it is in the news and it's a critical elected office in the state of Texas. Give us a thumbnail overview, if you can, about the State Board of Education and why it's important to the classroom and how efficiently our education system works, perhaps.
I came on as a specialist in the field of reading and specializing in dyslexia. I trained at Scottish Rite Hospital in the reading laboratory under Dr. Lucius Waits and taught kids who had dyslexia how to read, write, and spell. And I got so excited about it that I went back to college and got my master's degree, and then discovered that my oldest son, oldest of 4, had fallen through the cracks, if you will, of public ed, and discovered that he had a form of learning disability of dyslexia, and with 145 IQ. So I realized that the schools were missing out on helping these children that could be up to 20% in the classroom, and thinking that the teachers did not know what to do with these kids, and that they're not throwaway children. They're very bright, they're little Einsteins, and they have a lot to give and a value, if you will, to the community, to life. So I jumped in with all fours, if you will, on the issue, and there were 3 bills on dyslexia that came to my desk in the January of '85, and I decided, okay, this is my purpose, and I call it my God moment, if you will. And I decided, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And so by the end of the session, I had 2 out of the 3 bills passed. And
if I can interrupt, you were integrally involved in writing the first dyslexia handbook, of which there were none prior to that. Texas was one of the leaders, correct?
Yes, and then I found out that our law, dyslexia law, which by the way is still on the books, was the first in Texas and the first in the United States, and it's still there, okay? And I'll never forget, the summer of '85, I thought, after it passed, I started saying, well, okay, that wasn't so hard, now what's next? So I get a call from a very angry special ed teacher who proceeds to bawl me out and tell me that we don't need that law, that they're just doing fine. And I said, well, this law is for children who are not in special ed. It's for regular ed kids who have mild to moderate dyslexia, and they're the children that are being missed by the teachers, and the teachers need to train and need to know how to do it. It's not hard, you know. And so he said to me, well, I'll tell you what, when you leave that board, that law will be repealed.
Really?
And then I said, I'm not leaving. And 30 years later, I'm still here.
You've been at it ever since.
I've been at it ever since, and it's been an interesting journey, one that I would never have missed. And I've met some wonderful people, and we've done some really good things for kids, as well as getting phonics into the schools was another goal of mine, of which we were able to do.
And now, not only with dyslexia back then, but there's so many more types of special needs, special analyses that have gone on that we know about the kids, how they learn. We'll get to that in a minute. Let me ask you real quick, though, about something that's been in the news here just the last week or so, and that's because you all have been dealing with the science textbooks, the subject of evolution versus creationism, as it's called, or intelligent design. But that might be helpful as a way for you to explain what the State Board of Education does, how it translates down to textbooks or computer program curriculum. Talk about what you've been doing here and what was you think your State Board of Education accomplishments were this week on the science front.
Okay, well, we are over, the State Board of Education are over textbook selection and review or selection. We were also over a very wonderful fund. We call it the Kids Textbook Fund. And it was created in 1865, and they created a State Board of Education to be over this fund that is oil and gas revenue invested carefully, cautiously, and then that money, our forefathers said, will go to paying each child a free book in the state of Texas in public schools. We have over 5 million kids today, and this fund is a $35 billion fund. It is in our Constitution, and we need to fight for it every 2 years, because the legislature, when they come in, they look over there at that big pot of money, and they think that they can dip into it to help balance their budget, when it is dedicated to the children of the state of Texas. So one of our jobs is to fight and protect that fund, and we do that. And that money then goes to like buying and reviewing and buying science books, English language arts reading books, history books, and so forth.
The whole gamut.
The whole gamut. And we are known in Texas, throughout the United States, as Texas goes, so goes the nation in textbooks, because we have one of the best review processes of any state in reviewing books. It's very transparent. Everybody gets to look at it. We make sure that it's error-free and it's factually balanced, so that the kids get all the right information, and they can then make up their mind how they want to, let's say for science. The reason that we want all theories of science about the beginning of the earth and how our world began, we want the children to have all that information. We want it, whether it's the creationist or whether it's just evolution. Many of us realize in our studies that, no one was there at the beginning of the earth, okay, and how it started. So someone said, well, God created this earth. Also, God created evolution. So the two go together very well together.
And probably most Americans, certainly Texans, would say that there's a little bit of both probably involved.
That's right. And I think I've talked to many scientists who have given me books, and I've read about the two together, go together, actually. And there's not one against the other. It's not a fight, okay? It's two, to go together.
Every 10 years, every 2 years, this year you have science. Next year you'll have English. You just finished up with math. It goes in an organized manner.
That's right. And it's really 8 to 10 years, but anyway, because it takes a couple of years for the books to be published. And anyway, so we think that we've settled that argument, 10 years ago, and here it is again. So we sat down with the people, the evolutionists, who really want to water down the creation side of it, because they don't believe that that's science and it should not be in a science book. And I understand that. But our job is to put all the information out, all the facts about how our wonderful, beautiful world began. Okay? And then let the children decide what they believe, and let them make up their own minds. And that's what education's about. You want to give all the information, make sure it's correct and balanced, and then let the child determine how he or she wants to believe.
Whether the Bernie Sanders side on the left or the Donald Trump side on the right, railing against people from on high trying to impose their thought processes. Yeah. That is a large part of what the State Board of Education does, is fight this political correctness, I would take it.
Yes, we do.
And with the science book, so you all have now set the structure theoretically. Mm-hmm. Tell us what happens after that it actually gets down into the classroom.
Well, then what we do is start having hearings, and we keep the process as transparent as possible. And the whole idea is to include teachers, parents, citizens, anyone who wants to come and get involved. And so we have committees first that sit down, and most of them are teachers or retired teachers, or just people that just absolutely love science and have proven that they could be another Einstein, mm-hmm. and they want to serve on the committee. But it's made up of mostly teachers and active and retired, and they come together and update the curriculum standards in, like, science, for instance. And so they debate it back and forth, and then they come forward and say, okay, here it is, here are our recommendations. And then we have hearings after that. Okay. People come, and a lot of them say, we don't believe that, we don't like that, and so forth, and we listen. And then we find compromises, and so that then we turn around then and vote on the books, and have our own debate, if you will, and determine which books we're going to recommend and put on the list. And of course, now with the digital books out, we also have that issue too, and include those like a Kindle and things like that. One of the things that we are finding that is very, very important in the digital world is to make sure that the information is accurate. Things change in that area, or if you will, in the cloud, and sometimes you get information that really isn't accurate, even though you think it might be. Just like some people think, well, they Google, and surely anything coming out of Google is correct. Not necessarily.
Everybody thinks if it's on the internet, it's got to be true.
That's right.
And let me ask you, because that brings another subject that you've been working on. I want to thank you folks again for joining us for this edition of Texas Insider TV with Tincy Miller from State Board of Education District 12, brought to you by the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. Ms. Miller, you've been working also on the math textbooks. You mentioned you've got to have factual information, but nothing in math really, it would seem, ever changes. However, you all have spent some time, I think, fighting back Common Core on the math front. Tell us what the battle's been there.
As you said, Jim, I've always thought math was simple, and you don't change it. It's 2 plus 2 is 4, mm-hmm. and so forth. But suddenly, here comes Common Core down the road in 2010, and it just started permeating the curriculum throughout the United States, and it was coming from a very liberal teachers, if you will, and professors. And it got into Texas in 2010 to 2012, and then it got into the math curriculum when we were updating it. And I believe what happened is that the when they picked the teachers, the math teachers, to be on that committee, they believed in Common Core, and so they integrated it into the curriculum before we caught on that it was not. It was a dumbing down of curriculum and a federalization of curriculum.
Really?
And so experts who had started looking deeper into the Common Core issue realized that it was not research-based and was put together by just some people without any transparency, and it was written very biased against America. They did things like leaving out George Washington in the history, things like that. I mean, just simple things that that could not be controversial, okay? But they left out Charles Lindbergh and things like that everybody knows and remembers and respects. So the experts began to criticize Common Core, and then at that time, while the math was being developed, our Texas legislature it jumped on it and started having hearings. And Dan Patrick at the time, who's now lieutenant governor, was head of the Senate Ed, and he started having hearings. And that is when we found out how bad Common Core is, and that it's not really a good curriculum. It's really a weak, very weak curriculum. And another way of, in our opinion, that socialism would get into the classes. In other words, they wanted all 50 states to do this curriculum, and it was like a lockstep, and we said, no, we're not going to do that. So Dan Patrick was able to get a bill passed, I believe it was 462, that said that public schools in Texas may not use Common Core in their curriculum. And we had our own state curriculum that had been mandated from the days of Ross Perot and House Bill 72. So Governor Perry at the time turned to the people who, from the federal government, who wanted Common Core into each state, and he said, well, you're not coming into Texas because we have our own state curriculum. Thank goodness, and I thank Ross Perot and back in those days in the legislatures that did that, or we would have maybe been accidentally caught in that temptation, because they were dangling out money, for the states that, if you'll take the Common Core, you can have some money, So fortunately, our governor could say, no, we're not doing that. And but what had happened, if this parallel was happening, the math books slipped through the cracks and were published and went through all that, got out into the schools, and then all of a sudden we started seeing parents, teachers coming and testifying in front of our board about the math curriculum, the math books, and telling us how hard they were, and they were crying. And in all of my 30 years, I've never had seen that before. It's never happened before in our board.
And the parents weren't even being able to help their kids do homework.
That's
it was
right.
So complicated.
It was so complicated, so difficult. And it was all these process standards that they were insisting that the kids had to use. And if there were 5 or 6 of them to get to an answer, they would judge them and grade them on the process rather than the answer. And literally, kids they could get an F on the process, on the answer if it was wrong, but an A on the process if they did the process right. It just didn't make sense. It was so ridiculous, and we realized then that Common Core was still there, in the background of this math curriculum that we believe is causing that. Well, anyway, long story short, we finally, because the books were already out there in the classroom, and the teachers did not know how to teach it, and there had been no preparation. The teachers did not have any preparation for it.
Speaking of structures, that reminds me, I've set a final question, I got one more, and that is, what's your general outlook for education in Texas? A lot of other states, I think you've mentioned before, would give their left arm to have the SBOE type structure in Texas that we have. It's not present in other states. Is it? Talk a little bit more about the system. It's a unique system and one that Texans should be thankful for, I think would be your point of view, right?
Yes, I do. We do have a unique system, and the thoroughness of it, by the way we develop the curriculum, and make sure that all the experts, and get as many experts in the field, and there again, everyone knows when you're working with an expert, even the experts can disagree.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to get a variety of people into the committee, build the curriculum, okay, and then the publishers develop the material, come back and you review that again, and go over that and make sure it's all error-free and everything, and then you send out the order, and the publishers come back with the books and meet all the criteria you asked for, and then the schools can pick out the books they want. They have the freedom to do that, and we have the money from our permanent school fund, which we call the Kids Textbook Fund. That's $35 billion, and we generate enough money that every child in the state of Texas in public school can have a free textbook. That's unique and different than any other state, and we're very proud of it, and we owe a lot to our forefathers for creating that.
Well, I want to thank you too for not only your work but for coming in and spending time today. We'll let you, sounds like you've got some money to spend out of the permanent school fund there. Folks, we appreciate you joining us for this edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. Tincy Miller from SBOE District 12, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Remember folks, you're either an insider or you're not. I'm Jim Cardle. Thanks for joining us.